In prophetic times. I wanted to give just real quick a statistic about this recent hostage deal. There's been a lot in the media that has been saying, well, the release of the prisoners from Israeli jails are of women and children that were being held in jail. So they make it sound like, oh, it's an equal proportion release, that we're going to give you back your women and children, and we're going to get women and children back. These women and children, most of them were, you consider children, 17 to 18-year-olds, who had attempted terrorist attacks. So 14% of them, of these Palestinian prisoners, attempted a terrorist attack. 12.4% of them used Molotov cocktails. 8.1% were involved in stabbing attacks. 11.1% had contact with terrorists. 10.1% were involved in a shooting. 10.7% were involved in explosives. And 6.4% were involved in other violences. 15% threw stones. So people are focusing on, they were just stone throwers. Not quite. So what happened, if anybody remembers, back when Gilad Shalit was captured by Hamas and brought into Gaza, he was held captive there for a while, and I believe they ended up giving 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for him to come back. Unfortunately, what happens is when they start seeing that you're going to give this number of prisoners in exchange for Israeli citizens, is it fosters more desire for them to kidnap. It makes them do it more. Doesn't dissuade them from doing it. So we need to keep in our prayers that Israel is not walking into a trap. It has given Hamas a little bit of a reprieve to be able to regroup, and we need to believe that there's no traps that they're planning and setting in the midst of Gaza that the IDF will end up walking into. But we are in the season of Kislev, and it is a season of miracles. Yes, and we're going to talk about that more today, but we've seen miracles that have happened in the midst of the whole situation in Israel. I believe we're going to continue to see the miraculous. Amen. We've all watched the DVDs, the Israel Against All Odds, that highlights all the miracles that happened during the Yom Kippur War, during the 6-Day War. And we're seeing those things happening again in this war. And like I said, I believe that we will continue, but we need to keep Israel at the center of our thoughts and our prayers.
So the month of Kislev, some interesting things that we're going to go over about it. But like Jordan was saying, it's a month of miracles. It's a month of light and miracles. Right. The two go together, actually. And so it's a month of light and miracles. But the biggest focus of it, with it being in the month of miracles, is because the great miracle of lights happened during this time. And that's what we mean by the two of them going together, light and miracles. But an interesting thing about Kislev, before we get into, it ties into it, before we get into the light and the miracles, is the symbol of the month. And the symbol of the month of Kislev is an arch, which is the rainbow. So like the rainbow that is seen in the sky when it rains on a sunny day, it is indeed the first rainbow that was seen after the flood, which appeared in the month of Kislev. The verse in Genesis 9:12 and 13 says, and Yahweh said, "This is the sign of the covenant that I have placed between me and you, and between every living being that will be with you for eternity. My bow I have placed in the clouds, and it will be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth." That was one of the miracles that Yahweh did. After, people look at miracles and you have a tendency, miracles are they have a tendency to think, I don't know how to explain it, like good miracles. Miracles are good, but miracles are a supernatural power of something that Yahweh does. So like the flood in itself is a miracle. Right. What Yahweh did in the flood in the days of Noah, that was a miracle. I mean, think about it. How did all this rain come down and this massive flood to take place? That was a miracle. You know, the 10 plagues.
All the plagues.
All the plagues.
Signs, wonders, and miracles.
Signs, wonders, and miracles. Those were miracles. But so the whole thing with the rainbow, you know, and these words were spoken to Noah, and this was all in the month of Kislev. There's so much important things that took place in Kislev, and that brings us to obviously Hanukkah. But so with the month of Kislev, you know, we were talking about this, I think it was last week or the week before. The month of Kislev is known to have a mood because it's dark and cold. You know, we're coming into the winter months. The days are shorter. It gets darker earlier. The cold comes, you know, stuff like that. But two significant events occurred during the month of Kislev that teach us a profound message of resilience and hope. You know, and our mission right now is we're going to tie things into Israel. Everything comes around back to Israel. This is what it's about. So this is something that I found that is for this time right now with what's been taking place in Israel. So it says, the message of the month of Kislev resonate deeply in many aspects of life, especially now given the ongoing war that Israel is fighting against the evil Hamas. So going back to the rainbow, so when you go back onto the 28th day of the Hebrew month of Heshvan, the Hebrew month before Kislev, Noah and his family left the ark following the flood that had destroyed the world. Upon disembarking from the ark, Noah encountered utter destruction and desolation, a world that was barren and silent. The next day, the first of Kislev, Yahweh made a covenant with Noah, promising to never again bring a flood that would destroy the world. He sealed this covenant with a powerful symbol of hope and peace, the rainbow. This natural phenomenon, with its vibrant spectrum of colors, symbolizes unity and hope amidst diversity and challenges. Implicit in the promise not to destroy the world again was a message of rebirth and rebuilding of the world, which was currently empty and bare. The rainbow, therefore, symbolizes hope at a time of desolation and despair. That's the rainbow, okay? That's what the rainbow is all about. So then we come to Hanukkah. At the end of the month of Kislev, we celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah. Hanukkah was one of the darkest times in Jewish history. Judaism was being eradicated. A significant portion of the Jewish population embraced Hellenism and was deeply influenced by Greek culture and philosophy. The Syrian Greeks perceived Judaism and its adherence to the Torah, belief in God, and observance of the divine commandments as a threat to their anthropocentric ideology. As a result, they forbade these practices. Though the situation was dark and seemed hopeless, the Jewish people experienced a national rebirth. Under the leadership of Mattathias and his sons, a small Jewish army fought in the name of Yahweh and defeated the mighty Greeks. As a result of the miraculous military victory, the Hasmoneans recaptured the temple in Jerusalem. One of the first things that they did was try to rekindle the menorah. The menorah symbolized spirituality and the light of Yahweh in this world. The Hasmoneans were not fighting for political independence, but for spiritual renewal. And lighting the menorah was a response to the darkness of the Greek culture. Though they were only able to find 1 day's worth of oil to light the menorah, Yahweh performed a second miracle, and the small amount of oil burned for 8 consecutive days. The relighting of the menorah stood as a powerful counter to the prevailing dimness of Hellenism. The holiday of Hanukkah reminds us of the enduring triumph of light over darkness, good over evil. So what does that mean for Israel today? Kislev is the time when the world is at its darkest. The natural interplay of light and darkness is a metaphor for the struggles between good and evil, hope and despair. The rainbow and the miracles of Hanukkah symbolize the triumph of faith and perseverance against all odds, and of good over evil. The month of Kislev therefore serves as a powerful reminder of the unyielding human spirit and the potential to overcome great adversities. It symbolizes the potential for renewal and the triumph over evil. Israel's current struggle to protect its citizens against evil terrorists is a struggle to bring more light into the world and diminish the darkness. Just as the few Maccabees fought for their right to practice their religion and live in peace, small Israel, outnumbered on all sides by enemy nations, is fighting for its safety and stability and for righteousness and morality. And just as the rainbow suggests that there is hope following destruction, we will not be deterred by the events of October 7th, 2023. As Kislev begins, it brings with it a message of optimism. It reminds us that even in the darkness of times, there is always a light that can be kindled, a hope that can be nurtured. It reinforces the enduring belief that good will prevail and that peace and light will ultimately overcome the shadows of discord, strife, and evil. That's part of what the month of Kislev is about, light and miracles, especially in this time of what's going on in Israel. And all the miracles that are coming forth out of what's been taking place in Israel. There's so many things where you see that the hand of Yahweh is moving among his people. So back to circle around to Hanukkah a bit again. When the Hanukkah candles are lit this year once again, Jews around the world will be commemorating the two miracles. The first miracle is a miracle of might. The small band of Jewish fighters led by Judah the Maccabee and his family were victorious over the Syrian Greek army. Overmatched in numbers, weapons, and experience, it was not expected that they would be able to turn back this huge foe and reclaim the temple in Jerusalem, which had been desecrated. Yet that is exactly what happened. The book of Maccabees recounts how the Jews were able to emerge victorious due to their edge and strategy and bravery. It clearly was a miracle brought on through the acts of these courageous people. The second miracle is the miracle of light. The Talmud recounts that when the victory was secured, the Jews entered the temple in Jerusalem and found it desecrated. There was only the one small cruse of pure oil, enough to light the menorah in the temple for that one day. But it lasted 8 days in time to produce a new pure oil, and the menorah was able to remain lit and never burn out. This miracle is tribute to Yahweh and the faith that the Jews had in Yahweh. On Hanukkah, therefore, we think of both the power of humanity and the power of Yahweh. In order to live our days and make the world a better place, we learn that we must take an active role to stand up for what is right, defend just causes, seek out justice, and perform acts of loving kindness. And when I read that sentence last night, I was thinking, we were talking about last week or the week before about how, we're still going to wear our tzitzits. We're still going to wear the Star of David's. We're still going to put, Defend Israel stickers on our car. We got sweatshirts and stuff. And it's amazing. Who would have thought, even in Fitchburg, I was telling Jordan the other night, I was walking through Market Basket the other night with my Defend Israel sweatshirt on, and this guy kept walking up to me, an employee of Market Basket. I like your sweatshirt. I like your sweatshirt. Now, in all honesty, you kind of walking, kind of feeling like, okay, you need to have your guard on, type of thing. But it was the exact opposite. People are commenting, we like that. More people stand for Israel than we realize. And they're just waiting to see others who are bold enough and courageous enough to stand up, and it sparks them to be able to do the same thing. It's a gangster.
Gangster to support Israel.
On Hanukkah, therefore, or you confused, you made me mess up with the gangster comment. All right. We also learn from Hanukkah that faith in Yahweh and living an active spiritual life can also bring light into our lives and make us fulfilled. There is comfort, joy, and solace in knowing that our faith can give us strength and inspire us to be good people, do good things, and bring us joy and blessing. The lights of this year's Hanukkah candles needs to remind us all to reflect on those miracles long ago, remind us of the daily miracles and the blessings in our lives, and inspire to partner with Yahweh in making this world a better place. So we're going to focus on miracles. So what is a miracle? A miracle is a highly improbable or extraordinary event, development, or accomplishment that brings very welcome consequences. It's an act not fully explained by natural forces, but attributed to the supernatural forces of Yahweh. It's an amazing or wonderful occurrence. It's an effect of or extraordinary event in the physical world that surpasses all known human or natural powers and is ascribed to a supernatural cause, which is Yahweh. He's the miracle maker. He's the God of all miracles, the gods of signs, wonders, and miracles. And all of us sitting here in here this morning, all of us have seen Yahweh's miraculous power in our life one way or another. All of us in here. From even before we were saved. There's some of us in here that even before we knew Yeshua should have been taken out in car accidents. But we walked away from them without even a scratch. There's some of us in here that should not be standing here right now because of situations that took place. His hand was on us before we were even saved because we were picked and chosen for such a time as this. He is the God of miracles. And anything that you're believing for, he is more than able to do it. He's already done it. But if you just look at the account of miracles throughout the Bible, it is recorded that they were saying that to actually try to record all the miracles that Yahweh has done from the beginning, okay, because not all of them are recorded in the Word, is an infinite amount of number. But we're going to look at some of them, just biblically speaking. And, you could look at the miracle of creation. All right, look back at the beginning of time, the miracle of creation. From the very beginning, creation was a miracle. Some of these we're going to look at because we want to see, you get the miracles, you see them in your eyes. Because what he does for one, he does for others. He's no respecter of persons. No respecter of persons. So let's look at another miracle in Genesis 21. It's the story of Sarah and Abraham. Genesis 21, starting at verse 1. And it says, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for her as he had promised. For Sarah became pregnant and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time Yahweh had told him. Abraham named his son whom Sarah bore to him Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as Yahweh had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. And Sarah said, Yahweh has made me to laugh. All who hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age. So this is the story of Abraham and Sarah. Abraham's 100 years old, and Sarah was 90. That is a miracle, okay? Just saying. There's many reasons why that's a miracle, okay? But that is a miracle just right there. The whole story of Sarah and Abraham. And that just didn't stop at Sarah and Abraham. We read that throughout the Bible. You look at Hannah and the miracle that she did there. And interesting, because we were talking a little bit, when you look at this week's Torah portion, it's about Jacob's ladder and about Jacob and all that. What do we know that Jacob's ladder was? It was a portal. Okay, it was a portal. And a portal is a divine opening, an entry point, okay? And we're all portals. We're walking portals. We carry a portal over us. But there are permanent portals that Yahweh has done. And Jerusalem is a permanent portal. The Jordan River, but Shiloh. And when we're talking about miracles, you think of when Hannah stood there that day in Shiloh, and she prayed for her son. And what happened? Hannah becomes pregnant. And that portal still operating today. Myself stood in that same place as Hannah and Tiffany, and we received our modern day miracles. That same portal that Hannah had access to is available to anybody who's believing to have children. Permanent portals. But, and that's just an example because that's personal to us for our congregation. But there's that type of miracle thing that can happen to anybody. Anybody. Now, and I'm not just talking about believing for babies. We're talking about Sarah and Abraham, so that's why I was getting off on that. But nothing's too difficult for Yahweh. And even though Abraham was 100 years old in the natural and Sarah was 90, nothing is too difficult for Yahweh. Age did not matter. Age did not matter. Our God is a good God, and he can do all things. Let's look at Exodus 13. Exodus 13, and you look at the account in verses 21 and 22. The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. That was a miracle in itself. He's leading the Israelites out, and what is he doing? He's giving them a pillar of cloud to lead them and a pillar of fire to lead them. Another miracle. Let's jump over to Exodus 14. And starting in verse 13, it says, Moses told the people, fear not, stand still, firm, confident, undismayed, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians you have seen today, you shall never see again. For the Hamas terrorists that Israel has seen today, they shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your shalom and remain at rest. The Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the Israelites shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall go into the sea after them. And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians shall know and realize that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor and glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the angel of God who went before the host of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. It was a cloud and darkness to the Egyptians, but it gave light by night to the Israelites. And the one host did not come near the other all night. This is all miracles. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the Israelites went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And in the morning watch, the Lord through the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the host of the Egyptians and discomfited them, and clogged, took off their chariot wheels, making them drive heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and horsemen. So Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength and normal flow when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled into it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians and shook them off into the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that pursued them. Not even one of them remained. But the Israelites walked on dry ground in the midst of the sea, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that the great work which the Lord did against the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and trusted in the Lord and to his servant Moses. That is a miracle. He parts the Red Sea, and the Israelites are able to walk through it on dry ground. Can you imagine that in that day, walking through that, and you have this massive wall of water on one side and a massive wall of water on the other side? You're walking through a sea. Only Yahweh can do that. Let's jump over to Joshua 6. Joshua 6. Joshua 6, starting at verse 6. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. He said to the people, go on, march around the enclosure, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord and blew the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. The armed men went before the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard came after the ark, the priests blowing the trumpets as they went. But Joshua commanded the people, you shall not shout or let your voice be heard, nor shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout. So he caused the ark of the Lord to go around the city once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. Joshua arose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. And the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord passed on, blowing the trumpets continually. And the armed men went before them, and the rear guard came after the ark of the Lord, the priests blowing the trumpets as they went. On the 2nd day they compassed the city enclosure once and returned to camp. So they did for 6 days. On the 7th day they rose early at daybreak and marched around the city as usual. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the city and all that is in it shall be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messages whom we sent. But you keep yourselves from the accursed and devoted things, lest when you have devoted it, you take of the accursed thing, and so make the camp of Israel accursed and trouble it. Verse 20, so the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. When the people heard the sound of the trumpet, they raised a great shout, and Jericho's wall fell down in its place, so that the Israelites went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. There's another amazing miracle, the walls of Jericho falling. Let's jump over to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 4. Chapter 4, starting at verse 1. Now the wife of a son of the prophets cried to Elisha, your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord. But the creditor has come to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you of sale value in the house? She said, your handmaid has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. Then he said, go around and borrow vessels from all your neighbors, empty vessels, and not a few. And when you come in, shut the door upon you and your sons. Then pour out the oil you have into all those vessels, setting aside each one when it is full. So she went from him and shut the door upon herself and her sons, who brought to her the vessels as she poured the oil. When the vessels were all full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there is not one left. Then the oil stopped multiplying. Then she came and told the man of God. He said, go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. Right. Multiplication of oil, a mighty, mighty thing right there. And in the same chapter, it's the story of the Shunammite woman, and we all know this one very well. She just keeps replying, all is well. All is well. Is everything okay? All is well. But in the natural, her son has died. But she kept saying, all is well. I just need to get to the prophet. But all is well. And so you jump down to verse 32. And it says, when Elisha arrived in the house, the child was dead and laid upon his bed. So he went in and shut the door on the 2 of them and prayed to the Lord. He went up and lay on the child, put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, and his hands on his hands. And as he stretched himself on him and embraced him, the child's flesh became warm. Then he returned and walked in the house to and fro, and went up again and stretched himself upon him. And the child sneezed 7 times and then opened his eyes. Then Elisha called Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite. So he called her, and when she came in, he said, take up your son. She came and fell at his feet, bowing herself to the ground. Then she took up her son and went out. Another amazing miracle of a boy being raised from the dead. Then we have other stories in 2 Kings 5. We read about Naaman being healed from leprosy. You look in Daniel, and you see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Okay, but they weren't alone. There was a fourth man in that fiery furnace. And we all know about the fourth man in the furnace. Then you have Daniel that was in the lion's den, okay, being saved from hungry, ferocious lions. But Daniel, Yahweh, miraculously keeps him alive in the lion's den. And there's so many different accounts in the Old Testament. Miracle after miracle after miracle. But let's jump forward into the New Testament and look at some of them there. Let's look at Matthew 9. Matthew 9, verse 27 says, "And as Yeshua passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, shouting loudly, 'Have pity and mercy on us, Son of David.' When he reached the house and went in, the blind men came to him, and Yeshua said to them, 'Do you believe that I am able to do this?' They said to him, 'Yes, Lord.' Then he touched their eyes, saying, 'According to your faith and trust and reliance in me, be it done to you.' And their eyes were opened." And there's account after account in the New Testament of blind eyes being opened. Let's look at Mark 7. Mark 7, verse 31. Soon after this, Yeshua, coming back from the region of Tyre, passed through Sidon on the Sea of Galilee, through the region of Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had difficulty in speaking. And they begged Yeshua to place his hand upon him. And taking him aside from the crowd, he thrust his fingers into the man's ears and spat and touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed as he said, "Ephphatha," which means be opened. And his ears were opened, his tongue was loosed, and he began to speak distinctly and as he should. Now, when I read that, I get this vision of this man. He's deaf. He can't talk. I mean, we don't really know the history of it all, but maybe he hadn't talked his entire life. He was a mute individual. But what does it say right there? He began to speak distinctly and as he should. How do people learn to talk? They start when they're 2, 3 years old, and the words start to try to come out, and sometimes it's hard to understand what a toddler is saying to you. And then as experience and time, then the speech starts to flow. That was not the case in this man. It was like he had always been talking. As soon as his mouth was loosed, he had fluent speech come right out. It wasn't this, he had to go back years to learn how to talk. It was instantly there. The miracle of instant talking was instantly there for this individual. Let's look at Luke 13. And again, in the New Testament, there's miracle after miracle. So many accounts of what Yeshua did, what the disciples did. So Luke 13, starting at verse 11. "And there was a woman there who for 18 years had had an infirmity caused by a spirit. She was bent completely forward and utterly unable to straighten herself up or to look upward. And when Yeshua saw her, he called her to him and said to her, 'Woman, you are released from your infirmity.' Then he laid his hands on her, and instantly she was made straight, and she recognized and thanked and praised Yahweh." Instantly. And when you read these miracles of healing, so many times you'll see, and suddenly, and instantly, instantly that man was able to speak like he had been speaking all his life. Instantly this woman straightened up and she was completely straight. And there's miracle after miracle. You have the story of Yeshua turning the water into wine. Okay? We all know that one really well from Chosen. Okay? When you see that scene in Chosen. But just that, turning the water into wine. You know, we see what he did with multiplying oil, and then you see him turning water into wine. Let's jump forward to John chapter 2. Oh, actually, I got ahead of myself because this is the story. John chapter 2, verse 1. On the third day there was a wedding at Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Yeshua was there. Yeshua also was invited with his disciples to the wedding. And when the wine was all gone, the mother of Yeshua said to him, "They have no more wine." Yeshua said to her, "Dear woman, what is that to you and to me? My time has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were 6 water pots of stone standing there, as the Jewish custom of purification demanded, holding 20 to 30 gallons of peace. Yeshua said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." So they filled them up to the brim. Then he said to them, "Draw some out now and take it to the manager of the feast." So they took him some. And when the manager tasted the water that just now turned into wine, not knowing where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, he called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone else serves his best wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then he serves that which is not so good. But you have kept back the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, miracles, wonder works, Yeshua performed in Cana of Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Just a quick note on this. There's secular scientists who will tell you, she's talking about the miracle of creation. And there's secular scientists that try to rebut the fact that creation took place in 6 days. They say it takes longer than that to form elements. It takes longer than that. For instance, the speed of light. If the sun was created on the third day, they argue it would have taken years for its light to reach Earth. But this miracle of Yeshua turning the water into wine is a good example. How it takes wine a long time to age. You know, wine has to go through an aging process. And the fact that it says it is the good wine means it was aged even longer. So Yeshua stepped in and took the time factor out. You notice in a lot of these miracles, the time factor is removed. You know, even in some of the cases of healings that take place, he removes the time factor. Somebody has a broken limb, the body is naturally made with the ability to heal. But when a miracle happens, it removes that time factor. It supersedes time, and it creates something in an instant. That's why it says in an instant. Like she said, the man who was deaf and mute, instantly he was able to speak clearly. Instantly, these things are happening. So the fact that he, and interesting in this, there were how many pots of water? 6 pots of water. So that kind of points right to the 6 days of creation right there. He took the time element out of things that normally would take a process to be created, to form, to grow up. They were created in an instant at the power of his word.
Then you can look in John 11:38, and that talks about the account of Lazarus being raised from the dead. Then all throughout the New Testament, we see the healing of lepers and demoniacs. In Matthew 9:2, there's the paralyzed man that was lowered through the roof. In Matthew 12:10, you have the man's withered hand that was healed. In John 6:15, Yeshua walks on water. Okay, there's a miracle, Yeshua walking on water. And John 6:1-14 talks about the feeding of the 5,000, when there was just a little amount of food, and Yeshua multiplies it and feeds 5,000. But let's look at one more in Luke 8:41. Luke chapter 8, starting at verse 41. And it says, and there came a man named Jairus, who had for a long time been a director of the synagogue, and falling at the feet of Yeshua, he begged him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And Yeshua went, the people pressing together around him, almost suffocating him. And a woman who had suffered from a flow of blood for 12 years, and had spent all her living upon physicians, and could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood ceased. She touched the tzitzits, and immediately her flow of blood ceased. And Yeshua said, who is it who touched me? When all were denying it, Peter and those who were with him said, Master, the multitude surround you and press you on every side. But Yeshua said, someone did touch me, for I perceive that healing power has gone forth from me. And when the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, she came up trembling and falling down before him. She declared in the presence of all the people for what reason she had touched him, and how she had been instantly cured. And he said to her, daughter, your faith and trust has made you well. Go, enter into peace, untroubled, undisturbed well-being. While he was still speaking, a man from the house of the director of the synagogue came and said to Jairus, your daughter is dead. Do not weary and trouble the teacher any further. But Yeshua, on hearing this, answered him, do not be seized with alarm or struck with fear. Simply believe in me as able to do this, and she shall be made well. He instantly had to address something that could have stolen Jairus' miracle. Fear was a weapon that was coming in, trying to steal a miracle. And that's why Yeshua instantly turned to him and said, do not fear. Do not fear. Believe in me, and all will be well. Everything will be all right. He had to, see, instantly Satan came to try to stop a miracle. But Yeshua says that to him. And in verse 51, it says, and when he came to the house, he permitted no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the girl's father and mother. Very wise, just saying, okay? He kicked them all out. And a lot of people not a lot of people, but I've heard some people say, well, that was harsh of Yeshua to do that, to remove her family members and all that. Her family members could have cost the miracle because they were bringing in fear and doubt and grief. All right, and Yeshua knew all the weapons of the enemy had to be removed from that atmosphere in order for Jairus to receive the miracle. Verse 52, and all were weeping for her and bewailing her. But he said, do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn, knowing full well that she was dead. And grasping her hand, he called, saying, child, arise from the sleep of death. And her spirit returned from death, and she arose immediately, and he directed that she should be given something to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had occurred. So you have, again, the miracle of raising this girl from death. But back to the woman with the issue of blood. She just didn't receive the miracle of health in her body. You know, there's accounts when you read commentaries on that when she received that miracle of her healing, she also received restoration in her finances, in her relationships, and she was made whole. What do we know about shalom? Nothing missing, nothing broken. Life and wholeness, completion in every area, restored back to better than before. That's what Yahweh does. He restores to better than before. So with that woman with the issue of blood, her miracle was not just in her body. Her miracle, she received a miracle in every area of her life, better than it was before. And in all these miracles, you know, this is the time that we're in of Kislev, the month of miracles. There's miracles all around us, okay? And there's miracles that are waiting for us just to hearken to them, for us to pull them into this dimension. Yahweh's already done it. He's already done it. The miracle has already taken place on his side. It's up to us. You know, it takes two to tango, okay? And it's up to us to pull it over onto this side. But, you know, I didn't want to not, since, you know, we're talking about miracles and we have Hanukkah coming up and and everything with Israel and stuff. It was just real heavy on me last night. I was, thinking of, okay, what about miracles? People will say, well, that's in the Bible. Miracles aren't for today. Oh, you better believe miracles are for today. Okay, and maybe they're not for you for today because of what you're saying, and you don't believe it, but they definitely are for today. But, in the most dire of situations in the natural, and it may look like things are impossible, we serve a God who makes the impossible possible. That's what a miracle is, making the impossible possible. So it was just real strong on me last night, and I just Googled something, and it came up. And I thought, okay, I can do this. But, miracles, and you might not think it's so, but there were many miracles that took place in the Holocaust. Right. Many, many miracles that took place in the Holocaust. So this one came up. And I read it, and I wanted to read this one because it's like, this is who our Yahweh is, okay? This is who our God is. And since we're in the season of miracles, so this is obviously, it's a true story. And these are 6 amazing miracles that this girl is writing about that took place with her grandparents and her aunts that narrowly survived the Holocaust. It says, as soon as the Nazis occupied Kovno, Lithuania, it was in June 1941, they and the Lithuanians started to oppress Jews. From the beginning, Jews were ordered to wear 2 yellow stars of David, one on the front and one on the back of their garments. Lithuanian partisans and Nazis entered Jewish homes and took clothes and jewelry, killed men and later women. In early July, the Jews were ordered to put barbed wire around a suburb of Kovno called Slobodka. All Jews, about 40,000 of us, had to move into the ghetto Slobodka, or Kovno ghetto. We got one little room in a house. We were 4 people, my mother, my wife, Rachel, my 4-year-old daughter, Etta, and myself. Survival was a matter of miracles. We were not allowed to go out of the ghetto except for hard labor. We went to work on commandos under Nazi guards. The killing of Jews in the ghetto was a regular event. Survival was a matter of miracles. October 28, 1941 at 6 a.m., the Nazis ordered all the Jews to line up, 8 persons in a row in a big field, for the purpose of counting how many Jews were in the ghetto. Row by row, we passed a Nazi officer who was sitting on a chair in the field. He ordered some rows to go to the left and some to the right. In our row were my mother on my right, Etta on my left, and Rachel. When our row approached the Nazi officer, he ordered us to go to the left. At this moment, my heart told me to go to the right. I grabbed Etta's hand and pushed her and the others to the right. It took a full day till the Nazis ordered us to return to our homes. The following day that we found out that those who went to the left were killed. About 10,000 Jews were killed at this action, mostly the elderly, children, and the sick. Yeah. I think that's why it was so much harder reading this now. But anyways, exactly. That was miracle number 1. Miracle number 2. The Nazis came more and more often to search the houses for children and the elderly. One day, we hardly managed to hide Etta in the bed, covering her with pillows and blankets. Nazis came in, searched around, and walked out. They had not looked in the bed. This, too, was a miracle. This is actually from this little girl, Etna. When a search occurred, my parents would hide me inside the bedding, roll me up with the bedding, and place me in the bed against the wall, parallel to the wall, so that it appeared to be a sofa. I had difficulty breathing, and yet I knew that I was not to move, or the Nazis would find me. This is a 4-year-old little girl. 4 years old. Miracle 3. March 1943. I worked inside the ghetto while Rachel was sent to forced labor outside the ghetto in the city of Kovno. Suddenly, the ghetto was surrounded by an unusually large number of Nazi guards and Lithuanian partisans. Big trucks entered the ghetto. The Nazis, through loudspeakers, ordered the Jews to remain in their houses. I noticed that the Nazis were grabbing children and old people and throwing them into the trucks. I took Etta, now aged 5, into a tiny bin under the steps which led to the second floor. I asked my cousin Yakov Shakin to cover the door to the bin with an old mattress. Nazis entered the house searching for children and old people and did not notice our hiding place. We hid here all day long. The following days, the Nazis continued the search, and we stayed in hiding. About 5,000 children and old people were killed in this action. This is again. My father and I hid under a staircase which led to the second floor. We remained hidden for 2 days. It was cold and we did not have any food. I had a cough which I would desperately try to suppress so as not to be heard. We could hear the Nazis climbing the stairs over our heads, and we could hear the shouting and the screams all around us. After this, the Nazis declared our ghetto a concentration camp. The regimen became even stricter. Miracle 4. Now, Rachel and I decided we had to find a place for Etta at our Gentiles' home. It was a tragic feeling to give her away without knowing about her future safety. The only hope was that maybe one of us, Rachel or I, would survive and have Etta back, and Etta would have a parent. One day, Rachel, at forced labor in the city of Kovno, managed to sneak out of her workplace, took off her yellow Star of David, and went to a priest. Maybe he could find a Gentile who would like to take Etta and save her life. The priest promised to look for a family, but not before Christmas. Time was critical. We felt something bad was going to happen in the ghetto. Meanwhile, we started to train Etta. We taught her to say, if people asked her whether she had parents and who they were, that she does not know her parents, that she is an orphan, that her name is Elenite, and that is all she knows. We trained her to sit still inside a potato sack, which was to be used for smuggling her out of the ghetto. Sensing the danger to her life, Etta trained herself to hide in times of crisis, under the bed or in bed, covering herself with pillows and blankets. She never had a smile on her face in the ghetto. This is a 5-year-old having to train herself to survive. I decided to try to contact a Gentile school principal I knew. One day in March 1944, I managed, while working outside the ghetto, to ask a Gentile lady to deliver a letter to his friend, Lasiskas. In my letter, I asked him to come to my place of work the following day and meet me in the men's room. When he came, I asked him to keep Etta till after the war, and then to contact my brother Binush in Switzerland. Binush would pay him for his expenses and take Etta to Switzerland. His answer was, you Jews deserve all the trouble you have now, but you, Raphael, you are an exception. I will take Etta to my house. I was shaken but said, I'm not going to discuss with you now, but thank you for saving my daughter. The following day, we put Etta into the potato sack so it looked like Rachel was carrying tools. I had to stand behind a house in the ghetto, and as Rachel passed the house with her brigade, I ran up saying loudly, you forgot the tools. I gave her the bag in which Etta was lying. The Nazi guards did not react. This, too, was a miracle. Rachel carried Etta in the bag to her place of work. She managed to take the yellow stars off of Etta and went across the street to the lady who the day before had taken my letter to Laskas. This woman took Etta to Laskas. Laskas kept Etta from the middle of March to the middle of August 1944. I had spent almost 3 years in the ghetto. During these years, this is Etta. During these years, I did not have toys. I could not play outdoors. I did not have companions my age to play with. The only companion I knew were hunger and fear. And when my mother carried me out of the ghetto, I did not know whether I would ever see her or my father again. Miracle 5. In July 1944, the Germans decided to liquidate our Kovno concentration camp and send the Jews to Germany, the men to Dachau and the women to Stutthof in East Germany. We were pushed into cattle wagons. Each wagon, there was a German guard. We were all standing because it was crowded. Suddenly, I noticed an opening in the wall of the wagon near the roof. I asked Rachel if she would like to jump out of the train. I will, I said. Maybe Etta will be blessed and have a parent. Rachel said that I should do it. So I asked a few Jews in the wagon to engage the Nazi guard in conversation so that he would not notice my jumping out. I climbed up to the opening, jumped from the moving train, fell on the ground, and fainted. A Lithuanian railway employee found me lying on the ground. He asked who I was. He said that he had looked in all my pockets and did not find any documents. It was then that I realized I had fainted. I pretended that I was a Gentile, a working man, and had gotten drunk. He didn't believe me, and he said he would take me to the German police office. I could not persuade him not to do it. I had nothing to lose, so I started running through the fields toward the woods. In the fields, I saw stacks of hay. I crept into one stack and covered myself with hay. After a while, I heard a man talking in German. Germans were collecting the hay. They collected all except my stack of hay. Imagine that. They collected all except my stack of hay. Perhaps they had no more room for them. Miracle 6. During my wandering, I entered a house in a village and asked for a drink of water. It was given to me. Then I asked if I could go to the stable and rest on the hay. This I was refused because they did not know me. I walked out of the house and saw a German walking around. I quickly went into the stable, climbed up under the roof, and covered myself with hay. Suddenly I heard somebody climbing up and poking around in the hay saying, "Cursed Jew, he got lost." I remained in the hay all day and all night. The following morning, I walked away. After this, the Russians occupied Lithuania, and I became free. I went immediately to Kovno, about a 24-kilometer walk, to look for Etna. I came to Laskus. He told me he had to send Etna to his sister in a village because it was a danger to Etna to stay in Kovno. He walked with me about 20 kilometers to his sister's house, and I found Etna. This was my happiest day. Rachel was freed by the Russian army in January 1945. However, the Russians mobilized to rescue Jewish women and put them to work for the Russian army. Rachel worked as a cook. She sent a letter to Laskus asking if Etna and I were alive. Laskus brought the letter to me. I in turn sent Rachel a letter saying that Benusha's brother and Etna would be in Lodz, Poland. Don't go to Kovno, but wait till you can meet them in Lodz. June 16th, June 16th, 1945, Etta and I went to Lodz and met Rachel. This was the greatest miracle of all, that the three of us survived and were reunited. Grandma Rachel passed away when I was 5, and Grandpa Raphael passed when I was 10, so I was never at an age to ask them about much of this directly. I do still remember Zeed's sharply bent left pinky which he broke when jumping out of the train in Germany. Apparently he could have had it fixed, but chose to keep it bent as a permanent physical memory of these tragic events. Growing up, I had heard the gist of the miracles from my family, but hadn't really reflected much from it. I just took it in as an early life fact that the Holocaust was a terrible event, and that I'm very blessed to be here. Now, over 20 years later, as I travel Europe for a month to do a bit of soul searching, I found myself curious about my past and decided to ask some questions to learn more. My mom sent me the book where the story was published, and I read it while eating dinner by myself at a burger place in Amsterdam, not far from the house of Anne Frank. I found myself gasping audibly on more than one occasion while reading the stories, feeling surprised by how little I actually remembered. These moments that were before quite fuzzy now felt so real and so present. 6 amazing miracles, from instinctively getting into the right line, to jumping out of a moving train, to hiding under a staircase for 2 days, my family narrowly avoiding death at every turn. Any one of these moments could have gone the other way, and if they had, I wouldn't be alive today. Eager to learn more, I reached out to my Aunt Etta, mentioning I wanted to help share this story in any way I could. She pointed me to an oral history interview she did for the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in 1997, and more recently a talk she had just given at a service in New Jersey. To conclude her talk in New Jersey, she said, "I'm particularly aware that those of us who survived the Holocaust must keep telling our stories. That time is running out. That is important that the younger generation must pass those stories on, and it is passed on from generation to generation, so that what happened is never forgotten, that the world learns the lesson of the Holocaust." Every generation shares stories a little differently. We once engraved hieroglyphics onto walls. We later placed ink onto scrolls. We eventually mass-printed books, and now we publish bits right here on the internet. So by sharing this here, in a medium less fragile for a story so important, I hope to help keep my family's history and the tragic moments of the Holocaust alive in our memories.
So, miracles are things that are present in life. And so many times I think we overlook miracles because we're looking for spectacular things. I mean, the fact that we're, like she said, the fact that we're alive here today, it's a miracle. The fact that, things that haven't happened in our lives, that should have happened in our lives, that's a miracle. The founding father and author Thomas Paine once stated that in the same sense that everything may be said to be a mystery, so also may it be said that everything is a miracle, and that no one thing is a greater miracle than another. The elephant, though larger, is not a greater miracle than a mite, nor a mountain a greater miracle than an atom. To an almighty power it is no more difficult to make the one than the other, and no more difficult to make 1,000,000 worlds than to make one. So everything that we're seeing in our lives, everything around us, we need to start looking for the miracles in everyday life. We need to start looking for the miraculous, for things that Yahweh has his hand in. Again, like I said, when you miss something in your life, you miss this should have happened to me. That's a miracle. That's Yahweh's hand on you. But miracles are not something that just drop down upon people usually without their involvement. All the accounts of the miracles that she read in the Bible, they require something from the person involved in the miracle. The woman with the issue of blood, if she had stayed in her house, the miracle would never have happened. If Jairus had never gone for Yeshua, the miracle would never have happened. His daughter would have died. The woman with the little jar of oil, if she hadn't followed the prophet's instructions, the miracles wouldn't happen. The multiplication wouldn't have happened. The little boy's lunch, if he hadn't given his lunch, those 5,000 people wouldn't have been fed. Time after time, the miracles require our participation. You're looking for a miracle in your life, you're looking for God to move in your life, you've got to do something to give him something to work with. You got to do your part. He's already done his part. He's already created the laws, he's set them in motion, he's provided for you everything that you need. We've talked about that in our covenant of shalom is everything that you need, but you got to line yourself up with that. You got to do what he tells you to do. There's this story that this preacher told that a small community of farmers were in the midst of a drought that seemed to be continuing in an eternity. They were in a quandary as to what to do. Rain was important to keep their crops healthy and sustain the townspeople's way of life. As the problem became desperate, a local pastor called a prayer meeting to ask for rain. Many people arrived at church to pray for the needed rain. Pastor greeted most of them as they filed in. As he walked across the front of the church to officially begin the meeting, he noticed most people were chatting across the aisles and socializing with friends. When he reached the front, he began to quiet the attendees and start the meeting. When he finally got everyone's attention, he abruptly dismissed the service. The farmers protested loudly until finally the pastor said, "You said you were here to pray for rain, but not one of you brought an umbrella. If you're praying for rain, bring an umbrella. If you're believing for a miracle in your life, do what you can to prepare for the miracle. If you're believing for God to bless you with a car, if you're believing for God to bless you with a house, do what you can to prepare for that miracle, because then you'll be in the position where you can receive it. These things that happen, a lot of times we're mislabeling the miracles in our lives, and we miss them. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's not, well, all the stars lined up. It's not any of these things. It's Yahweh's hand, and that's how it happened. And a lot of times people think of miracles. You think of something as simple as an airplane. That would have been a miracle to people a few hundred years ago. They would seem like a miracle. In reality, it was just people found out how to use the laws that Yahweh had in place properly. And so many times miracles require us to get into alignment with how Yahweh works. But think of how our unbelief could render a miracle impossible. Like she said with Jairus, that Yeshua had to get a hold of his doubt and say, don't fear, only believe. You got to believe. You got to get yourself into alignment. If it wasn't important for Jairus to be in faith, if that had nothing to do with the miracle, he wouldn't have bothered saying that. He would have just acted sovereignly and done it. But he needed Jairus' faith. Had Thomas Edison not been a man of faith, not been a man of perseverance, not been a man who was determined to see an outcome, we might still be preaching this by gaslight. We might not be preaching online. Any of the things that we see in modern electricity today, it has been reported that Edison failed over 10,000 times before perfecting the first electric light bulb. The miracle in that is that he stayed with it that long. Most people would have given up after maybe 100, maybe not even that many times. How many times do most people try something before they say, this won't work, and give up? He stuck with it. He failed over 10,000 times. 10,000 times. That's a lot of times. On one occasion, a young journalist challenged Edison, saying to him, Mr. Edison, why do you keep trying to make light by using electricity when you have failed so many times? Don't you know that gas lights are with us to stay? To this, Edison replied, young man, don't you realize that I have not failed, but I have successfully discovered 10,000 ways that won't work. It's all in how you look at it. Fine, it might not have worked before, but I'm going to try something different. Abraham and Sarah, they stuck with it a long time, believing God's promise. They were old. It was impossible. But they saw the end of their faith because they hooked up with Yahweh's miracle-working power. Because Edison believed an electric light was possible, he refused to give up. He tried countless types of material in his search for a filament that would work. He sent men to China, Japan, South America, Asia, Jamaica, Ceylon, and Burma to search for fibers to test in his laboratory, all to no avail. On October 21st, 1879, after 13 months of repeated failures, Edison finally succeeded in finding a filament that would work. While experimenting, the thought came to him. Now, where did the thought come from? Yeah, Holy Spirit. Why not try a carbonized cotton fiber? After going through 2 spools of cotton, he eventually perfected a strand only to break it while trying to place it in a glass tube. He refused to give up and persevered with this idea for 2 more days and nights without sleep. Finally, he succeeded in placing the carbonized thread into a vacuum-sealed bulb. Eureka, it worked. So he stayed with it. Interesting, Edison's son, Charles, wrote about a different event about his father in his book. One December evening, the cry of fire echoed through the plant. Spontaneous combustion had broken out in the film room. Within moments, all the packing compounds, celluloid for records, film, and other flammable goods had gone up with a whoosh. When I couldn't find Father, I became concerned. Was he safe? With all his assets going up in smoke, would his spirit be broken? He was 67, no age to begin anew. Then I saw him in the plant yard running toward me. Where's Mom? He shouted. Go get her. Tell her to get her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again. Could you believe it? rather than saying, oh God, why did I deserve this? 67 years I've faithfully lived my life, and this is what I get in return. He says, hey, son, get your mother. This is an unbelievable sight. Look at this fire. That's how he responded to it. At 5:30 the next morning, when the fire was barely under control, he called his employees together and announced, we're rebuilding. One man was told to lease all the machine shops in the area, another to obtain a wrecking crane from the Erie Railroad Company. Then almost as an afterthought, he added, oh, by the way, anybody know where we can get some money? Later on, he explained, you can always make capital out of disaster. We've just cleared out a bunch of old rubbish. We'll build bigger and better on these ruins. With that, he rolled up his coat for a pillow, curled up on a table, and immediately fell asleep. One day, Thomas Edison came home and gave a paper to his mother. He told her, my teacher gave this paper to me and told me to only give it to my mother. His mother's eyes were tearful as she read the letter out loud to her child. Your son is a genius. This school is too small for him, and he doesn't have enough good teachers for training him. Please teach him yourself. After many, many years, Edison's mother died, and he had become one of the greatest inventors of the century. One day, he began to look through old family things. Suddenly, he saw a folded paper in the corner of a drawer in the desk. He took it and opened it up. On the paper was written, your son is addled, mentally ill. We won't let him come to school anymore. Edison cried for hours, and then he wrote in his diary, Thomas Alva Edison was an addled child that by a hero mother became a genius of the century. The power of one person to change the life of another. You know, what if she had read what that note said to him? We would never have seen all the things that he was able to create. How many people have been told they can't do something? You're never going to amount to much. You're never going to be, look at Rick Renner's teacher. He talks about that, how his teacher told him he called him stupid Renner. Like, what a thing to call a child. And he grew up believing that he couldn't do anything. But something changed his life. And look at him now. Look at the Greek scholar that he became. Don't tell me that somebody can't do something. With the power of God, all things are possible. But if you're sitting there waiting for a miracle, you got to do what you need to do to receive the miracle. You know, I've never seen a race where where the finish line moves toward the person, and they're standing still, and the finish line is moving toward them. That never happens. Or a swimmer, they swim in place, and the finish line moves toward them. That doesn't happen. You got to do something to get toward the finish line. If you have a goal in life, if you have a place that you want to reach, a place of success that you want to get to, whatever it might be, you got to do your part in moving toward that. The birth of Isaac was a miracle, but it was because of Abraham and Sarah's faith. They had a part to play in it. The birth of Yeshua was a miracle because of the faith of Mary and of Joseph. They did stuff to act upon it. The miracle of the Hebrews being freed from Egypt began with a burning bush in the Midian desert. It begins in a place that is unknown. Oftentimes, it's like that scripture in the Bible. Who knows what the kindling was that set the forest aflame? If you see a life that's ablaze for God, there was something that struck that match. There was something that started that fire burning inside of them. Mary first conceived Yeshua in her heart before she gave birth to him. She had to see and believe what the angel told her. There's more to a miracle than what we see. Like with icebergs, there's a lot more that we don't see than what we do see. And we got to believe that it's there. If receiving a miracle is dependent on us having the spirit of Mary, then what we should say is, I am the servant of the Lord. May it be as you have said. Our agreement is what positions us to receive the miracle. The man who was blind from birth that Yeshua healed received his miracle not through the mail, but by going to the pool and washing the mud off of his eyes. That was his act. Moses had to take his staff and go to Egypt. He couldn't stay out in the desert of Midian and all the miracles happen. He had to do something. The answer to our receiving a miracle is us being in position. We got to make sure that we're in position. We're not just sitting here waiting for a miracle, Good to say I'm expecting a miracle, but expectation is not motionless. It's not stagnant. It's not I'm just going to sit here and wait for it to show up. No, it's I'm going to do my part to be participator in the miracle.
That's right.
So many things in life, we have the ability to participate with the Creator in His creation, to participate with Him in the miracles that He has planned for us. He has great things planned for us. He has good things planned for us, but we got to make sure that we're in position to do it. And we got to be more determined than the enemy. The enemy is determined to stop our miracles. He's going to try to throw everything discouragement. He's going to try to throw us off of our path so that we don't end up receiving our miracle. But if we will stay focused, if we will stay determined, if we will say, just like Abraham said, I know what the Lord said.
Right.
I know what the promise of the Lord was. I mean, even to the extent of that he was willing to offer up his son, Isaac, because he believed that he said, through him, you're going to have all these descendants. Right. Well, Isaac can't stay dead if it's through him that all these descendants are coming. That's the kind of faith it is required to get a miracle. A faith that holds on to the promises of God and won't let go. A faith that defies the impossible. That says that an impossibility is just an opportunity to see God do the supernatural in my life. There is no impossibility with him. With him, all things are possible.
You know, we're talking about miracles. Sherry was talking about in the Holocaust and all that. Well, in our present day Holocaust that is taking place, or was trying to take place in Israel, there have been multiple miracles going on. We saw on Thanksgiving, somebody showed the picture of a young man who carried his Tehillim with him, a psalm book with him, and he kept it because he was always reading the Psalms while he's a soldier. He's an IDF soldier, and he had it with him, and he had it in his pocket, and he was shot, and the bullet stopped in the Tehillim. He holds it up. There's the bullet lodged in it. It saved his life. It saved his life. Had he not had that, again, like she said, you got to participate. You have to be doing something. And another one that I heard of was of a young man. He was a Jewish man. He was not following the Jewish ways that he should. And his parents were always trying to get him to become more observant of things. And, he finally, one week decided, okay, I'm going to start keeping Shabbat. I'm going to light the candles. I'm going to do the tefillah and all that. I'm going to do the prayers and all that. And so he started 2 weeks. He had been doing Shabbat. He lit the candles. He was observing Shabbat. He went to synagogue and all that. And some friends of his told him about a festival that was taking place, a peace festival that was taking place called the Nova. And he said, I'm going to get, they had already had tickets, and he said, I'm going to go. They invited him to go. And his parents tried to tell him, no, you can't do that. You just started keeping Shabbat. You're being more observant now. You're following, they didn't say Yahweh, but you're following him, Hashem, and all that. And, they're trying to tell him, don't go. You made a vow that you're going to stop being more observant. You're going to follow Hashem and all that. He said, no, I'm going to go. So he left like at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he drove down to this festival, okay? And he was meeting these friends that had invited him. And when he got there, there they were. The friends were there by the car and all that kind of stuff. So they started walking into the thing. Well, shortly thereafter, all that we've heard about in this festival began. It began with the sirens, then it began with the terrorists coming in and everything. And so they started running to go run to their car to get out of there. They got in it and started going, but they were being surrounded and they were being shot at. So they got out of the car, and the friends all wanted to keep running away from where it was. He had a sense, no, we're going to run back into where the festival had taken place. So they do. He had this sense about him. And all the while, he's praying, okay? He's praying, and he's saying, yeah, he's saying, forgive me, he's doing teshuvah, okay? Forgive me, don't let my parents be bereaved of their son, okay? I repent, I'm gonna, and he started, praying and all that, and they all ran back into where it was. Now, there were thousands of terrorists all over the place. And I don't know if you saw any of the pictures or any of the videos of it, but they had rows of porta potties, okay? Well, he senses and he tells his friends, let's go in this porta potty, okay? And they're thinking, no, this is crazy. And he said, no, come, let's go in there. So they go in. Now, they don't lock it because then it's going to show a little red thing on the outside saying it's occupied. And there's terrorists all over the place, and they're in there. Well, they began quietly, they began singing Shema, and they began praying, and they began quoting the Psalms. They began doing tefillah, okay? They were praying and praying. They heard all around them, they were hearing things. They were hearing all kinds of things, okay? And they just were there praying, and he was repenting and repenting and repenting and promising Yahweh, if you save me from this, I will keep Shabbat. I will keep Shabbat. I will never do this again and all that. And so they're in this place, and the friends now had not been keeping anything, but they joined him. They joined him in all of his prayers. They joined him in the Shema. They joined him in tefillah. They joined him, okay? And then they heard people speaking out there and saying, come out, we're the IDF, we're for you, come on out if you're here. And he said, don't. He had a sense, don't go out. So they didn't. And they waited 8 hours in this porta potty, 4 of them crammed into this little porta potty, okay? Finally, they heard, after 8 hours, and praying, they're praying all this time. And he's promising, Hashem, I promise you, I will not violate Shabbat again. When they finally heard someone, and it was the IDF, and the boy recognized that it was somehow he knew the language of how they speak and all that, and he knew it was really the IDF, and they were saying, come out. They came out. When they came out, there's a row. When you talk about every other haystack was burned, but that one wasn't. Every single porta potty had been shot completely, and all over the landscape outside of all of them were all bodies, okay? The only porta potty that was standing was the one that they were in. Don't tell me, like she said, you've got to do your part. He's always done his part. It's an already done deal, okay? But you have to connect. It's like connecting 2 elements to cause the miracle transformation to take place. This young man had for 2 weeks been keeping Shabbat, violated it by going to this thing, but repented. He knew about the power of teshuvah. And he went in there, and it's talking about him now when I heard the thing. Since then, he is very devoutly doing Shabbat. And he understands that he was saved, and it's a miracle. But his friends, because they were willing to, talk about your shadow going over someone, because of him, because he was willing to repent, he had started the weeks before being obedient to his faith, he was able to save those other men as well, because they followed suit. And it was all led by Holy Spirit, and it was all a miracle for this time. And so there's many others. There's many miracles that we're hearing that are taking place. Guns jamming, okay? That couldn't shoot somebody or something. There's all kinds of miracles. And I think on the other side, we're going to hear more and more and more. But this is a season of miracles. And again, she spoke about Miriam. That was one of the biggest miracles, was her saying, how's this going to happen? Holy Spirit is going to overshadow you. And it's in this month. It's in this month where that biggest miracle of all of time took place. And it's when the miracle of light and life was conceived within Miriam's womb. okay? And then here we all are, and we're carriers of that light. And we've got to remember that this is a month of it's like the veil is thinner. There's certain anointings in different months that are carried. And if you can step into it, that portal of that, things are a little easier. They're a little easier to get into your manifestation. And this is one of them. The month of Kislev is the month of miracles, and it's the month of light. And we have to remember that, we have to walk in it, and we have to say, we want to be a participant in it. And we want to make sure that our following of Yahweh has our shadow filled with that anointing so that others are going to benefit from it as well. Amen? Amen. You know, go ahead.
Thank you for those of you who joined us today. We trust you've gotten something out of this message. We will see you on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Until then, you have a blessed week.